All right, I'm going to get started. Just do our welcome and then we'll wait for Myra to get back in again. But thank you for joining us again for our third session, which is called Module 2, because the first module actually has an A and a B because they're so closely linked. And so welcome and thank you for being here today. As I mentioned, Natalie can't be here this morning, but we want to thank Mount St. Vincent for being one of our sponsors, and then Credit Union Atlantic, CUA, for also being our sponsor of the program. So I'm just going to admit another person. So again, just as a reminder, you need to make sure that you have your full name on your screen so that we can track you for your credit with Mount St. Vincent. So I know I see somebody that has iPhone listed, so you will need to change it to your full name, which I think you can do if you take a look at the dots beside your name. I think will give you an option to rename yourself and put your full name in there. So we're just waiting, as I said, for Myra to come on in and get started. But just reminders that you can have your cameras on or off, depending on which you prefer to do. And Myra very much encourages you to ask questions. You can do it in the chat. I will monitor the chat, or you can put your mic on and ask questions while, if you have any questions at all while Myra is speaking, we definitely encourage that. We do ask that you have your mic off when you're not asking questions. We do ask that you keep your mics off. It just helps with any noise in the background. And I see Myra is connecting again, which is great. So hopefully she'll get connected. You're muted at the moment though, Myra. There we go.
Okay, now I just need to get my camera up and working.
Perfect.
Here we are.
Excellent. So we've done our introductions, we've done our thank yous, but I do want to introduce Myra Lucia. She's our fabulous presenter and facilitator for our third session of #adulting. She can give you a little more information on herself, but she's been our phenomenal presenter for this program and others for a couple of years now. So I'm going to turn it over to you. We are recording, Myra, so I've already remembered to do that. And then I've made sure that I asked people to put their full name, which I think everybody has at this point, which is great. So I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you so much, Brenda. So I think we have some of the same people that we had. I guess the last session I did was 3 weeks ago. Like Brenda said, I've been doing this coordinating with Brenda in junior achievement for a little while, and we have a little bit more of a history than that because one of my children was very sorry, I'm seeing Fabiola, you're asking a question. If you want to turn your cameras on, that's great. I would love to see who I'm presenting to, but if you don't want to turn your cameras on, that's fine too, whatever you're comfortable with. To let you know, I do have 25 years experience in banking. I do have children that are of university age, one that just graduated and one that's still in university. So the advice I'm giving you today and some of the things that we're going over is what I teach them as well. So I hope with this session as well that we, oh goodness, I'm still having some technical difficulties with my system. So please bear with me. I'm trying to get the presentation up and running here. This learning is for you guys. 100% for you guys. So if you have questions, please interrupt me. Feel free to use the chat if you're more comfortable with that. But if you want to unmute yourself and ask questions, that gives me a better idea of where to take the conversations. What's most important to you. Now, today we are going over budgeting and savings. So they are pretty big conversations in themselves. But I'm hoping I can get the PowerPoint going in just one moment.
Yeah, I did just make you co-host because when you logged back in, I hadn't. So hopefully now you can do it.
Okay, thank you. things are starting to come up here. So let me see. I just need, I don't know how everybody else is feeling today, but it is a cold and wintry Friday, and I feel like my laptop is just trying to hibernate today. So here we go. Perhaps. Okay. So it's not actually letting me do anything. I'm gonna have to try this one more time, guys, to get the presentation going.
And I think what I'll do is the first thing that we have is a video for budgeting. So I'm going to put the link for it in the chat. And if everybody wants to just watch that on their own, because we always have problems with the sound, and I'm not sure how Natalie makes it work, but she always makes it work for us. So I have put the video, it's a YouTube video, in the chat. If everybody wants to take, I think it's about 3 minutes long. If everybody wants to take about 3 minutes to watch that, that'll give Myra a minute to get her presentation up and running. Myra, if it just won't work for you, I could put it up on my end and you could just tell me when to change slides.
If you could, because I'm just getting the presentation up, so the video isn't really working for me right now. Sorry about that.
Well, that's okay. They're playing the video on their own, so that's good.
Okay,
But
no, it is, so it is coming up for me now, yeah.
once you finish watching the video, just put a little "okay, I'm done" or "okay" in chat so we can get an idea of when everybody's kind of ready to start again. recording in Okay, we've got a few people saying that they're finished the video now, Myra. So whenever you're ready, we'll everybody else will just kind of finish it up as you're getting your presentation up.
Okay, wonderful. So I will go ahead and share my screen here. There's the PowerPoint. There we go. Is that coming through all right, Brenda? Fantastic. Okay, so I hope everybody's done with the video. We'll sort of get started. So today we're talking about budgeting, saving, and investing. Today we'll learn a little bit more about a budget, how you make a budget, what the different kinds of budgets are. We'll also talk about cash flow and planning around your cash flow. How to examine and compare costs of living, with different situations. I know some of you may be on campus, some of you may be off campus, some of you may be considering moving off campus next year. So things to consider. We'll look at the difference between needs versus wants and living within your means. And we'll talk a little bit about savings, vehicles, and emergency funds. And then we'll go a little bit more in depth into actually investing and what your options are. So with that, let's get started here. So again, we want this to be really interactive because it is about your learning. I want you guys to get the most that you can get from this session. So other than what is on this slide, what is a budget and why is it important?
It's something that helps guide us in how we spend our money.
Absolutely. It's a plan, right? It's a plan to get you to your goals. I'm seeing in the chat that it's prioritizing your net income. Absolutely. That's actually, both of those are really great. It's a plan and it's helping to prioritize your goals or with that plan. There's a saying, and I bring this up with a lot of my financial literacy sessions. I'm sure Brenda's probably tired of hearing it, but there's a saying, a goal without a plan is just a dream. So if you have goals, I'm sure that you have financial goals, whether it's to be debt-free when you graduate, or your goal is to pay down your student loans, for example. All of those are goals, but how are you going to do that? That's where your budget comes into play. So it's the same as with anything in life. Say, for example, you are an avid runner and, 5 days a week, you're running 5 kilometers. You're a fairly avid runner, you're in good shape, but then you decide you want to do a marathon. You want to do your first marathon. Well, how do you get there? You don't just all of a sudden run a marathon. You need to break that down into steps. Your goal is to run the marathon, but how do you actually get there? You need to plan that out. You need to, budget your time and budget your energy and, you know, your muscle resources, so to speak. Dealing with your finances is the exact same thing. So you need to build this plan. So saying that, where do you think you should start with your budget? What's the first thing you think you should determine with your budget?
I would say the income would be the first thing, the income
Yep.
for every month.
Yep. That's a really great start. I'm sort of taking a step back from there. You do want to decide what your goals are, because once you work out your budget, you'll be able to see how realistic your goals are. So for example, if your goal is as simple as making it to you know, the end of the school year without needing to rely on other sources of income or borrowing, for example, that's a perfectly fine goal. Some people's goal is just to, you know, thinking of the current time of year, to not go into debt over Christmas. So that is something that we have to determine a budget for. Without having a clear and defined goal, you're not really certain about things that need to be included in your budget. Okay, so definitely your income is a huge consideration. That's where that's sort of our key piece, is our income, or what money is coming in. But we do need to determine our goals as well. I see here somebody in the chat is saying to determine your income after taxes and how much you're paid on rent. And so that's definitely the breakdown of the budget. And yes, we do have to determine all of that. Any questions about, you know, considering goals? Keeping in mind, your goal can be just as simple as making it to the new year without going into debt, or it can be just as simple as, you know, not overspending your student loans, for example, this school year.
Like, I guess for me, it's hard because I don't have a job, but I still get money through like disability support. So like, it's different for me to plan a budget
Mhm.
in the sense that I live at home and my parents get the money, but I still want to plan a budget.
Yep, absolutely. So I would suggest for yourself that your goal is to stay within your income, right? So your goal can be as simple as that. It's just not overspending. So to live within that income that you are getting. Your budget is going to look a little bit different because you don't necessarily have the same bills as other people, but you still have that goal of living within that income. Okay, does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. So that brings me to another point. And I say this all the time as well. Finances are as individual as your fingerprints. Okay, a budget that's going to work for you is not going to work for somebody else, and vice versa. A budget that works for, you know, your sibling who lives at home with you isn't going to necessarily work for you. You have different priorities. You have different incomes. You have different goals. So keep in mind that even though you may be working on a budget with, say, with a roommate, and you think your bills are all the same, your priorities can be different. So a friend can help you with a budget, but don't do exactly what your friend is doing, okay? You guys are different people, different priorities. It's the same for everything with your finances. It's individual to you. Another thing that I know I said in the first session, and I keep saying it, is when you're looking for an opinion, you can ask a friend. If you're looking for advice, you go to the experts. So that's why, you know, Brenda has somebody like myself. Like I said, I've been in banking 25 years. This is what I do. I'm considered an expert in providing advice of this nature. If you wanted, you know, if you wanted me to look at, I guess, let's say a recipe with you, and you want me to tell you if it's a good one or not, I can give you my opinion, but I'm not a chef. So I don't know necessarily if it's going to be good or not. Okay, does that make sense as well? You need to make sure that you're going to the right people. Okay. So let's dig into the budgets a little bit here. Oh, and I forgot to mention as well in all the kerfuffle, we will probably take a 5-minute break sort of halfway through or between our budgeting topics and our saving and investment topics, okay? So if anybody's wondering if there is going to be a break, there is going to be a small break, yes. Okay, so budgets. Budgets can look like this. They can definitely be involved. They can be really simple. They can be really complex. So when it comes to your budget, what is going to work for you, again, is going to be different from somebody else. How often do you think you should look at your budget?
Hello,
Hi.
I'm Fabiola. As a mother, and well, I have 2 kids and I am studying too, so we have to take a look of the budget all the time. We don't have something writing down.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, but I keep it on my mind all the time because yeah, we are thinking about not just in this semester, I am thinking in the future semester. So I am thinking how attainable is to finish this diploma and how we can do it as a family because it's like a project.
Yeah.
So I am working too. We have some savings and my husband is also working. So we have to take a look of how much we are getting in our jobs and how much we have and how much I can spend every semester. So for example, I am just taking 3 courses per semester to not spend too much money.
Right.
And that is one thing that I take a look at and I pay attention to. And also, for example, we don't go too much to buy food or those kind of things in which we can control the expenses.
Yes, yeah. And you know what, Fabiola, it might be a good idea to actually start writing your budget down.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to be complicated, but what you're telling me is that it's constantly on your mind.
Yeah.
Write it down so that you and your husband are both able to visually look at it and see where your priorities are. You know, it sounds like you're very much on the same page, which is fantastic, but to write it down may actually, you might find that it takes it off your mind a little bit. So to me, it's worth a try because it could take some of that stress off you, knowing that you both see it. It's fantastic that you're both on the same page because, again, finances are a huge source of stress. You know, people lose sleep over it. People, you know, relationships break down over finances.
Yeah.
So if you're on the same page, that's a huge step forward for both of you. Your priorities seem to be the same. Your values around money seem to be the same. But where it's constantly on your mind, writing it down might actually help ease that stress for you. Because that's what we find. People come to us and they're very stressed about stuff until we put it in front of them in writing and they can see exactly what it looks like.
Yeah, thank you. Well, something that is stressing for us is because we are newcomers. So when we get here, we couldn't find a good rent. So we got an expensive rent. And that is something that we have to consider the next year
Exactly.
to have a lower one. And also I am watching the budget, the example of the budget that you have here, and it looks like the statement of earnings, right?
It's fairly close, yes. But this is, keep in mind, this is just an example. This is a very basic example. The other thing that this brings to mind is, you know, there's budgeting tools and budgeting apps. There's a ton of them, but your bank, normally your online banking, will have a budgeting tool on it. So it can be really basic. I know, for example, I don't think they use it anymore, but RBC used to have My Finance Tracker. And if you took the time to initially set that up correctly, you didn't have to deal with it again. Every time you used your debit card, it would track where your expenses were coming from. So it would break it into gas, it would break it down into groceries and things like that. And it would automatically put those amounts in, and you could show it as a graph, or you could show it, or sorry, a pie chart or a graph. But it would show you each month exactly what you were spending in each category that you set up. So there are those tools out there. So you don't need to necessarily reinvent the wheel or wonder exactly what you need to put into a budget. There are a variety of tools, but depending on how financially responsible you are, and Fabiola, what you're telling me, it sounds like you are fairly financially responsible.
Yeah, thank you.
You might not need as detailed of a budget as somebody else who is more of an impulse spender. So again, your budget is going to look very different from somebody else's. You know, you may have, I guess, Fabiola, in your situation, you're going to have different sources of income because you're considering your husband's income in there as well. You said you have children, so you'd have child tax credit that you could consider for income as well. So you're going to have a few more categories under your income alone. You're also going to have different expenses for somebody who has children, somebody who's just living on their own, right? So all of that's going to look different.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, guys, around that? I see we have a few things here in the chat. So sorry.
I do have a question.
Sure, go
You
ahead.
said RBC doesn't use My Finance Tracker anymore.
I don't think they do.
So do they have something similar now?
I honestly, I don't know. I work for CUA, so I'm not really certain what RBC has available at this time. And the only reason I mentioned RBC is because I came from RBC to CUA. So I know what they used to have. But it is fairly common, you know, even CUA, we have a budgeting tool embedded in our online banking. It's pretty standard for all of the banks. You know, whether it's something that you actually have to input yourself or it's something that's automatically tracked is kind of the difference between the tools that each of the banks have. I believe Scotiabank has something similar, but please don't quote me on it. I haven't done the research to see exactly what's out there, but I know some of my my clients, they use some budgeting apps that they just can take pictures of their receipts, or they input each purchase that they make, and it's really simple. It's, you know, for example, you know, $20 gas, and that's done. It puts it right into the budget for that month for you, and then every week or every month, whatever you want to look at it, it has it all broken down for you. So it is any budget at all is going to be work to set it up. So there's going to be some things that you're going to have to research. There's going to be some things that you're going to want to look into. Now, when it comes to budgeting tools and apps, definitely, you know, again, I'm going back on a piece of advice I just gave. Talk to people around you. What budgeting tools and apps do they use? That will help in your research. They're not giving you advice on it, but helping you on your research of where to find some really good budgeting tools. Okay? But start with your online banking. Call your bank, find out what they do have, or just start playing around with your online banking. You might be really surprised at what you find. I'm seeing from the chat that we had a few different ideas of how often you should look at your budget. Some people said monthly, some people said, you know, weekly, depending on what's happening. Both really great answers. Again, that's going to be individual. Somebody who's really financially responsible, they might do a budget for a year, know what they want to accomplish in that year. So for example, if it's somebody who's really financially responsible and they say, you know what, this year I want to buy a vehicle and I want to spend this much on the vehicle, and maybe I want to go on a vacation, I want to spend this much. They'll work out their budget, they see how much they need to put aside in savings, And they just know they buy the same groceries or spend the same amount on groceries every week. And they just know that that's what it takes. And they can put this much aside and they know it's going to work out. They've done the initial calculation and they're disciplined enough to stick to that. Same thing as, you know, if you choose to, again, go from running 5K to running a marathon. Some people are great. They're just disciplined and can build, like, do their research, build that training plan, and then stick to it. Other people, like myself, things get in the way. You know, if I was to try going from running to, well, I'd have to start trying to run, but if I was to build out like an exercise plan, you know, I would have to factor in all kinds of things, and probably once a week, I would have to rework things. It's like, okay, this came up, or I have an appointment on that date for the dentist that they finally fit me in for whatever, or, you know, my dog needs to go to the vet suddenly, all kinds of things like that. So I can't do that training on that day. I need to move it around. That can happen with your budget as well. Okay, your budget can be a living document, something that needs to change constantly, or it can be more static. Okay, what I would suggest is at a minimum, you take a look at it every 3 months. There are statistics that show every 3 months there is a financial change. Okay, so whether it's how you're using your bank account, or, you know, it's just a cyclical thing that happens. So for example, Christmas is coming, we tend to spend more. We should look at our budget a little more closely at this time of year. You know, there could be a change in income, so you need to rework the budget for that. You're moving, so there's moving expenses. You need to rework that into your budget. There's all kinds of reasons, but depending on your discipline, that's going to decide how often you should be looking at your budget. So some people, again, can do it once a year and they're fine with that. They're quite settled in what they need to have happen. Some people, it's every month. Some people, it's every week. Some people break it down into daily expenses, because if they don't, they're very impulsive and, you know, will decide that what they brought for lunch they don't want, and they'll go out and buy lunch. That can blow their budget for the week, or can cause them to need to make a change for their budget. Does that make sense? Okay, I hope so. So we're going to talk a little bit more. We're going to jump ahead a little bit. There are certainly different types of budgets. And one thing that I want to sort of, I guess, hit home on is that one big overall budget doesn't necessarily suit everybody as well. You might have, you know, an overall budget for the large expenses, but then some of those expenses can be broken down into, you know, other smaller budgets as well. Kind of like a company. A company says, okay, this year we expect our profits to be, or earnings to be, X number of dollars. But then, you know, if I think about CUA as the example, they then break it down. Okay, we have these different departments and we have to create budgets for each of those departments within this larger budget. That can happen on a personal basis as well. So don't be afraid to get really, really detailed if that's the type of person you are, or if you find that you need that discipline. Okay, does that make sense? I hope so. Okay, people are saying yes and thank you. So where do we really start with our budget? We had mentioned income, which definitely that's a place that we're going to start. So I know, jumping a little bit ahead, I do believe, but we're going to go there anyway. We start with our income. What different sources of income do you have? I'm just going to stop sharing for a sec. So we have salary. So yeah, your income if you're working. What other sources of income do we have? Donations. Okay. Gifts. Okay, gifts would go under donations, right? Scholarships, absolutely.
And Amy said they were a subcontractor, but that would be kind of considered salary. So if you've got money coming in, that would be from
Yes.
work.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Anything else that you guys can think of? How are you guys financing your education? Types of benefits you receive, yes. And I think we've got somebody, it could be loans. Yeah, your student loans.
I don't know what the word for it would be, but I also receive money from my parents.
Okay. So
monthly.
what kind of, is it something that they invested for you, or are you receiving more of like an allowance? And I know when we hear allowance, we think of younger children, but no, allowances happen for all different reasons.
I think, yeah, maybe the right word would be allowance. I didn't know what the word would be. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I would put it under sort of the same thing as gifts or an allowance. Do they give you a set amount every time frame, whatever that happens to be?
It's every month a set amount.
Okay, wonderful. So you can really plan around that. That's great. Okay. So yeah, so we have student loans, scholarships, other benefits that you can get. You know, if you have a student line of credit. So I want to point this out, and it might be something, I know my colleague Danny did the last session. You talked a bit about credit and debt, I believe. So student loans and student lines of credit. Student loans are government sponsored and provided, where student lines of credit come from the banks. They're similar in that you have to apply for both of them. You also have to pay them back on a regular payment schedule. However, a student loan in any government program, any government benefits, they're all awarded on the basis of need. Okay, a student line of credit that comes from a bank, just like any other loan, mortgage, credit card, anything that comes from a bank is granted on the basis of your ability to repay it. Okay, so two completely different programs. Okay, if it's coming from the government, it's based on need. If it's coming from a bank, it's based on your ability to repay. The other big difference between a student loan and a student line of credit, with a student line of credit, you are required to pay interest payments while you're in school. Student loan, you don't need to pay anything while you're in school. Okay, so big difference there. It's always a good idea to see if you qualify for student loans rather than just jumping right into a student line of credit. Okay, so that's great. All kinds of sources of income. So if you're getting a salary or an allowance, something on a regular basis, it's really easy to work into your budget. Okay, so you can break that down by month. So things to consider: if you're getting paid monthly, or if you're getting paid semi-monthly, so like on the 15th and 30th of every month, you know that exactly what your pay is going to be each and every month. If you're getting paid weekly or bi-weekly, it looks a little bit different. Okay, so if you're getting paid monthly, that's 12 payments over the year. If you're getting paid semi-monthly, that's 24 payments in the year. If you get paid bi-weekly, because some months are longer than others, your bi-weekly payments are 26 payments every year. And weekly is 52 payments for 52 weeks of the year. Okay, so as you can see, a bi-weekly payment does not equate directly into a monthly payment. So you take your bi-weekly payment or income, times it by 2, that's not necessarily what you're actually earning each and every month. However, having said that, it is a good idea to stick to only considering 2 payments a month, because a third payment will only come twice a year. Does that make sense? Have I lost anybody with that? Okay, those extra payments that you get, okay, great, makes sense, thank you. Those extra payments that you can get can be bonus, they can go directly into your savings, or they can be put down on maybe a larger or higher interest rate debt that you're trying to pay out. If you pay a mortgage and you pay it at the same time as your biweekly payments come in, there probably isn't much left after after those payments happen or those regular bills happen on a bi-weekly basis. But how do you plan if it's something like a scholarship or student loan where you get that one lump sum? You know, that's a little harder to budget. It's a little harder to keep track of if you don't have a plan for it. So for example, if you've got a scholarship and say your tuition's paid, but you have money left over from the scholarship or even student loans, you know how much it is for this semester. How do you break that down? How are you going to work that into your budget? So again, it's going to really depend on, well, it could be as an extra. However, a lot of people depend on that money for their day-to-day expenses. They depend on it for their rent. You know, it just really all of their expenses. My daughter, who's still in university, her student loans and her student line of credit, she's not working at this moment, so, or while she's in school, so she is dependent on that money. So her budget, for example, and again, it's just an example, once tuition is paid and all of that, and the money actually gets deposited into her account at the beginning of the school year, she then breaks that down into the months for the semester. So September, October, November, December. She knows she's going to get an amount again in January. So she will break down that amount for those 4 months. So divide it by 4 and she knows what she has to work with monthly. The other thing that I've suggested to her, and again, it depends on your discipline. Once you've broken that down into the 4 months, you may want to leave just what you need for each month in your checking account, and the rest of it goes into a savings account that you don't touch. That way, the chance to overspend is lessened. So if you're worried about your discipline around it, do things that will keep you or force you to be more disciplined. So once the money's gone out of your checking account for that month, it's gone, okay? And you don't move money from the savings account into your checking account until the first of the month that it's allotted for. Okay, so there are a lot of things you can do with your budget to train yourself to be more disciplined, but it's still going to take some work and some self-restraint if you're an impulse spender, okay? Is that making sense? Is all of that sort of coming together for you guys, where we start with incomes?
Hello, I'm Fabiola again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always pay attention on how much money I am getting. Doesn't matter where the money comes, and how much I am spending in a certain period of time. So, and also if it is a loan, I pay attention to that loan, to the money I got of that loan, but
Right.
also on when I have to pay for that loan and how often I have to pay for that money too.
Yes.
So I usually do or think about that monthly. And
Okay.
yeah, that's how I
That's
do.
excellent. Yeah, excellent.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're just going back to the slides. We're going to talk a little bit more about cash flow. So again, like we were just talking about with the budget, your step one in actually calculating the budget is to talk about your income or your sources of income. So for example, we do need to talk about your after-tax income, or what's actually being deposited to your account, because that's the money that you actually get to use. So for example, if somebody tells you that their salary is $40,000 a year, what they actually get in their pocket to use is considerably less than that. So to calculate your budget off of your gross or before tax income, you're going to fall short each and every time. Okay, so you need to consider the money that actually comes into your account that you can use. Okay, when we're talking about income that might be more variable, so we're talking about donations and gifts, if they're not consistent or provided to you on a consistent basis, much more difficult to calculate and work your budget around. A lot of you might be working part-time, especially if you're working in the service industry. If you're a restaurant and you rely on tips a lot, how do you work that into your budget? It's definitely money coming in, but how do you work that into your budget? You don't necessarily know that you're going to get tips, the same amount of tips every night, or that you're even going to be working every Thursday night, and every Thursday night the place you work at is packed, the tips are going to be at least X number of dollars. You don't know that. So how do you deal with a variable income or variable money coming in? Any ideas?
Hello. Usually, see the money that is not a variable. I'm not sure if I am telling in a correct way, but I take a look of the money I am just getting normally, for example, my salary. But if it is something that it is variable, I just estimate that amount of money and something like that.
Yep, definitely. There are a couple of things you can do. And I see here, Sydney in the chat, you can figure out an average minimum you would usually take in. Absolutely. Absolutely. The other thing you can do is, for example, if you're guaranteed a certain number of hours, base your income on those number of hours. Okay, so if you're guaranteed, that's what you're going to get, that is a consistent part of it, then use that for your budget. And anything extra that you get can go towards maybe some of your lesser priorities. Okay, you might have a goal to save $2,000 this year. Maybe you don't take that out of your regular income, because your regular guaranteed income is making things a little tight, right? And you put that savings as what comes in tips, right? So again, your budget may have two portions to it. And one portion being your savings budget, may be a variable budget that's more of what we call the living document that needs to be looked at and changed with each and every shift that you have. Okay, don't be afraid to be a little bit creative with how you arrange your budget either. Okay, but the more that you can count on, the more that is a fact that you can work your budget or work around, sorry, what's the word I'm looking for, that you can work into your budget, the better, because then you are dealing with real guaranteed pieces of information instead of what ifs. Okay, and I totally get, especially for people working in the service industry relying on tips, your guaranteed hours may not pay all of your bills in your budget. I understand that, but you're going to take care of your biggest priorities first. So perhaps a roof over your head. Your rent comes out of that guaranteed budget, and you know how much you're going to need to make in tips, or how many extra shifts you might need to pick up to pay those rest of those bills. Does that make sense? Okay, I hope so. If there's any questions, guys, you really speak up, okay? So we're talking about cash flow again. You're going to want to add up all of your bills. Okay. And then simple calculation of just making sure that you subtract your bills from your income. And then you have what could be disposable income, if there is any left over. These days, I know it's hard for people to have anything left over, especially with rent the way it is, the price of food going up, things like that. I do want to take us off track just a little bit when we're talking about cash flow planning and things that we can do to ease our cash flow. What sort of things do you guys look at when you're trying to plan? So for example, last year, my budget for groceries was less than it is this year. And, you know, I don't know about the rest of you, but I love my salads, and I cannot bring myself to pay for lettuce when I actually find it. But how do we deal with those sorts of changes? Like, those costs are going up. So what kind of things, what tips do you have for each other that help stretch your dollars?
When I came here to Canada, I was a little worried because I knew the expenses in food will be higher. But now that I am here, I am really taking advantage of food banks. So that is really great. So it's, I don't know if this fit here, but it is something that I do to save money and to make my money, I don't know, to help my studies, my other expenses like the doctor and all of those kind of things. And yes, food banks have been really helpful for us. Because we can, and we spend less money than that we calculate, or that the budgets in web page say that we can spend per year.
Yes.
And also we don't go to the restaurants because we know we will spend more money.
Exactly. So there's, definitely a couple of things. I know the universities have their own food banks for students. And they've seen increases in that. I saw a piece on it just the other day. One of the universities even has a soup kitchen going now for students. So definitely there are a lot of options in that respect. I saw somebody said to price match and shop the sales. Absolutely. Thrift store shopping, or, clearance items. I don't necessarily have to stretch a dollar as much as some of you might have to, but I still look at all of the sales.
I have a suggestion.
Sure.
Try the no name brands instead of the brand name.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. That's a great tip. And I also see somebody said to reevaluate some of the items on your budget. Maybe you can free up some money. Buying bulk at the supermarkets, because supermarkets are, and buying things that the supermarkets are about to throw out. Absolutely. Do you guys use any of those? You guys have some great tips in the chat. If you bought some produce and you're not getting around to using it, freeze it. Use it in soups and stocks, stews, all of that sort of stuff. Freezers are great. They can be our best friend when it comes to budgeting. Amy, fantastic. The Flash Food app, 100%. I don't know if you guys know about Flash Food, but it's items that grocery stores, and I think it's Superstore that participates in it here in our area. Food that's like at its best before date, or, for example, getting to where they would put it on sale anyway. You can actually order and pay for it through the app. Oh, and Amy's providing the website to be able to download it. Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. So you can get food for a lot less through Flash Food. It might not be what you necessarily buy all the time, but experiment with some food as well. There's Checkout 51, that is online coupons. There is, you know, I know some superstores, they have a whole board up front where there's coupons. If it's something that you're going to buy anyway, but be disciplined. Don't buy something just because you have a coupon that you wouldn't normally buy. Okay. I know for myself, Checkout 51 has some great coupons for dairy alternatives. That seems to be their thing over the past couple of months. Fantastic. I use dairy alternatives. Here, actually, just this year, have switched to all dairy alternatives, and they're great. They are fantastic. And I will say Superstore actually has better prices for their dairy alternative sour cream and cream cheese than they do for their regular stuff. So take a look at some of those, and they, in my opinion, taste fantastic. I feed them to non-vegan and dairy eating people all the time, and they don't know the difference. And my friends would tell me if there was a difference. So you look at those things as well. Yeah, I'm seeing there, you're right. Some 2-liter lactose-free coffee cream is less money than the regular stuff. So be open to some things. I know, do a little bit of cooking, or maybe you can entice a friend who does some cooking to, you know, take some of the vegetables out of your fridge that need to be used. Maybe they can come over and teach you how to make a good stir fry out of it, or a good soup, something like that. So try to use everything that you are buying. Meal planning can be a great tool as well to stretch a dollar, but definitely things like that can really help your budget. Okay. And again, this is why a budget has to be a living document, because as you learn, as our economy changes, you will need to reprioritize or rework that budget as things become more expensive, unfortunately. Okay. Any questions around that, guys? Okay. So some great tips. Thank you very much. So we're going to go back. I'm going to share my screen again. And we're going to skip ahead a little bit because we've had the discussion on some of these things already. But needs versus wants. What are some things that we work into our budget that are expenses? I know we start with our housing, whether it's rent or mortgages. Sorry, I can't speak, or mortgages. What else would we have to put in there?
You mean in needs or what?
Yeah, just any expenses at all.
Doctor,
Yep, some medical,
dressing,
clothes, yep.
bills.
Yep, your utilities. I see that here in the
utilities.
chat as well.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Rent.
Yep, your rent would fall under housing. We would have, you know, what we were just, groceries, what like we were just discussing.
Insurance.
Insurances, yep.
And peace.
Yep, absolutely. So are any of those things that we've just listed, what do they fall under? Do they fall under wants or do they fall under needs?
I think they fall on their needs.
Under needs, yeah, a lot of them do. But how do we think that with some of these things, not all of them, but some of these things, how can a need also act like a want?
For example, if we get a rent that it is, I don't know, a nice apartment, but it is expensive and we don't need to get an apartment so nice. We just can get an apartment that cover our necessities.
Exactly. That is, you know, depending on what your priorities are, that can turn the need of housing into a want, or it can act like a want. The biggest example I have is our cell phones. How many people are standing in line to get not that there's anything happening right now, but to get the latest iPhone or upgrade their phone each and every chance that they have. That can keep your entire cell phone bill kind of sky high if you're constantly replacing your phone. Even though it says $0, you are paying for that phone through your plan. Your plans, some people, they get 20 gigs of data but never exceed 10. Why are you paying for the extra gigs when you really don't need it? So you're going to have to assess some of your necessities and make sure that they're not behaving like wants, because that will chew up your money or your available funds just as fast as being an impulse spender and not being very disciplined with your budget. Okay, insurances, shop them around, right? Seen in the, oh, geez, I moved the chat too quickly. You guys, you're on the right track. Absolutely. Some great things there about how needs can act like wants. So we do have to be careful. Even though they are needs, we still need to be careful about how we're viewing those. And by all means, if you want to have the nice fancy apartment in a specific location that you really enjoy living in that area, do that. But you're going to have to see how that affects the other things. For me, the grocery store. I'm terrible budgeting around food. I love to cook. I love everything about food. My fridge right now is full and I live by myself. I do not need a full fridge, but it's full. And on the weekend, I will cook every bit of it. And then I will be bringing meals to my daughters and to friends and things like that. But that's what I love to do. That's kind of my, that's my self-care, so to speak. But it is totally a want, completely a want. And I'm happy that I can do that. And I'm happy that I can help other people in that way too. But that necessity acts very, very, very much like a want for me. So we need to be careful around those things as well. Okay, but insurances, utilities, cell phone providers, shop those out. Find out if there's somebody cheaper. I know insurances, if you check in with them once a year, there are ways to reduce your insurance costs. There are companies offering different incentives. You're a student, so they'll reduce something. You're an alumni of a certain university, you get a discount for that. There's all kinds of things that companies change to help build their clientele. So do a little bit of homework. Set aside a day, maybe every year, that you check into insurances, and maybe another day that you check with your utility, one of your utility companies, or especially your internet provider, because they're offering specials and deals all the time. Okay, so take advantage of those things. That will help stretch your dollar as well. Is all of that making sense?
Myra, I'm just gonna add a little one on that with the internet provider. We happen to use Eastlink here because it's the best one in our particular area, and it just creeps up, and then probably every 2 years or so, I call them and say, can you do something better? And we were just at the point where our internet was up to $110 a month with taxes and everything in it. So gave them a call, had a big conversation with them, and she was lovely. My internet bill is now down to $79 for the next 2 years. So I mean, that's $30 right there just from making a phone call. So if you don't ask, they are not going to lower your bill. But if you do, then it's often a way to save some money. I mean, there's limits, of course, but that was
$30 savings a month. It's $360 a year. That could be a dinner out once a month. That could be, not that you necessarily need to treat yourself, but that could be the difference between, even buying certain groceries that you need.
Yeah, or something even more practical. I mean, that's, a couple of snow tires.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for adding that in, Brenda. I appreciate that. So what that all comes down to, and really thinking about these things, comes down to the ability to live within your means. So living and paying for things without needing to use credit or incur debt. That is living within your means. I'm not saying not to use credit cards at all, but as long as you can pay those credit cards off each and every month because what you spend on the credit cards has been worked into your budget, that's perfectly fine. That's still living within your means. So I don't know if you guys touched on this when you're talking about credit with Danny, but you know, if you're disciplined and you can use your credit card and pay it off each and every month, that does a few other things for you too. That helps your credit. You know, if you're paying it off each and every month and it shows, as opposed to leaving a balance on your credit card, and especially if the balance on your credit card is close to your limit, that shows the banks right away that you're relying on credit to maintain a lifestyle that you can't afford and that you're not living within your means. Okay, so there's a lot of reasons to do the budget. The biggest reason is to reduce your stress around your finances and to have a plan that you can work on. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. Are there any questions? Because we're going to take probably a 5-minute break very shortly, and we'll start talking about savings and investing. But any questions about budgets at this point? You know, definitely budgets can be very, very involved. There can be a lot of questions once you actually sit down and start working on it. But they're worth doing. They're worth the time that you put into it. And like Brenda said, one phone call and she's saving $30 a month for the next 2 years. That's pretty big.
Do you have
Mhm.
do you have templates for budget?
You know, we certainly can provide templates, but what I would suggest, you know, we'll definitely provide templates, but just be aware that a template may not fit what you need for your budget. So be prepared to add items or potentially remove items. Most likely you're going to need to add items to it. You know, I can definitely provide the link to the CUA budget in the chat while we're on break. And we can go from there. But the other thing, so I'll provide the link to the CUA budget form or template, and I'll also put my email address in there. So if you guys have any questions moving forward, you know, something that might be a little bit more personal, if you need some tips about doing your own budget, I'm certainly happy to answer those for you. Okay.
I
Even
also,
though we don't bank with CUA?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. If, you know, banks do a very poor job of taking the time to educate people on what their choices are and how to do these basic things. So, you know, you should be with a bank that does this for you. However, if they're not willing to do it, there's always somebody at a bank somewhere that is willing to do it for you. So even if you don't bank with CUA, absolutely. You know, this is my passion. Financial literacy is my passion. I believe in helping people to do this, to reduce their stress and have people more financially secure. It helps the economy overall. And it's the way that I get sort of career or job fulfillment. So absolutely, you guys can reach out to me.
Okay.
and also I will be giving Natalie probably on Monday, because I know she's at a conference this weekend, but I do give her some papers that she'll probably send out to you, like via email, not actual papers, but documents. And one of them is a budget planning sheet, and it has quite a few blank spaces on it for you to be able to write in others, whether it's other income or other sources of income or other expenses. And it's just I mean, it's really just a very plain kind of sheet. Personally, I set one up for myself on Excel because then it does all the math for me and it does all the pieces. So as I go in and change my numbers, it does the math and it has the formulas. But that's my own personal one for at home. But we do provide one that Natalie will share with everybody probably next week.
Okay, so why don't we take a 5-minute break? I have 10:14. Let's stretch it to 10:20 and then we'll jump into savings and investing. Hey, everyone, we've got about less than a minute left before we get started. Just thought I would start talking so that everybody starts coming back to their computers. Sorry, I left my water on the side of my desk. All right, I've got 10:20, so I'm going to get started again. So for the remainder of our time together, we're going to talk about savings and investing. Before I start sharing my screen, what's the difference between saving and investing?
Well, saving is just setting your money apart and not really doing anything with it, but just leaving it there. And then investing is finding a way of setting your money apart that will potentially bring us some profit by doing so.
Yeah, exactly. Fantastic definitions. Thank you. That's a good understanding of them. So let me get back to sharing my screen here. Okay, one thing that I do want to just mention as well, I sent you guys the link for the budgeting tools with COA, but I want to be clear, this is the page that it's going to bring you to. The actual budgeting tools are down here. So there's one that's based off of monthly and one that's based off of bi-weekly. They're really good templates to get you started. Okay. Feel free to use those or to build off of them. You know, you could change your bi-weekly one to a weekly one, monthly one could go to semi-monthly. Use them as you need. Okay. So let's get back to our presentation. If I can find it. Here we go. And I just need to skip forward a little bit here. All right, so what are some things that you guys have heard about, I guess, tips or advice, some common things that you guys hear about savings and investment? What are some things that are out there? What are some things that people have shared with you?
Saving in case of an emergency.
Right? Yeah. There's, you know, a real, what's the word I'm looking for? There's a push from a lot of financial people that you should have emergency savings, and that should be 3 to 6 months of your income, your annual income. You know, how do you even get there, right? Especially when you're relying on student loans or you know, scholarships and that sort of stuff. Where does that savings come from? How do you even determine how much you should have? Okay, any other tips around savings? Any you know, things that you've heard, sayings, I guess, things that you've seen on your bank's website, or you know, advertisements for your banks around saving and investing? What about the saying, pay yourself first? How many of you have heard that? What does that even mean, to pay yourself first? Any ideas? Okay, I see something in the chat here. Make saving a priority. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, your savings should come ahead of everything else. So once your needs are taken care of, those need bills are taken care of, you should pay yourself first. Everything else is considered wants. So if you pay yourself first, yeah, your savings should come ahead of everything else, but it's very hard to do. Yes, it is extremely hard to do. But if you get into that habit, even if it's as simple as, you know, a couple of dollars with each pay, or, you know, there's all kinds of different plans as well. There's challenges, savings challenges out there that, You know, for example, this week you start with $1, next week it's $2 that you put aside, the week after that it's $4 that you put aside. And it's amazing to see how that builds over time. But even, you know, people come into my branch all the time and they've got all of this change, and it's about $1,000 worth of change. It's like, oh my gosh, how did, you know, why do you have all of this change? How did you build this up? And they'll say, you know what, I just empty my pocket or my wallet every day of change when I get home at the end of the day. And this is what I've made over, you know, a year or 6 months. So something as simple as just taking that change out of your pocket can be paying yourself first. So even though it sounds or feels painful at first, it can actually be really quite easy. Okay. Another thing that we hear a lot is, you know, start early. Start saving and investing early. Why is that advice out there?
So that we don't so that we don't end up in debt when we leave home.
Yeah, that's definitely, you want to pre-plan for the expenses that you're going to have, or some of the larger expenses. Absolutely. Absolutely. Any other reasons why you would want to start early? Yeah. Sydney says you may want to start saving before you get to a point where you are stuck. So you're creating the rainy day fund. Absolutely, that's correct. But there's another reason, and especially when it comes to investing with your savings, there is, oh, sorry, I just lost this here. The next slide. When you start saving and especially investing early, you can actually make a lot more money. So we already said that savings is putting money aside, and investing is putting money aside and using it in the hopes of making some profits. So as you can see with this chart, the earlier you start making that profit, the more money you're going to have in the end. So I'll give you my own example, and this goes back to the point that Sydney made in the chat. I started saving. I was lucky enough that I could start saving early. So when I got, when did I leave? I graduated from university. I was 20 years old, and I was able to start, you know, back then, way back then, very easy to get a job. So I was working, I was living in my own apartment, had a roommate, was keeping costs low. I was able to start savings. And then I got into banking quite early on in my my adult life. So I started, you know, the savings and the investing. Then when I had children, it wasn't as easy to even have savings, let alone think about investing. But I had already built up some pretty good savings that were invested, that when I had the children and I wasn't saving and investing regularly, I was still watching the money that was already invested grow. Okay, so the few years that I wasn't able to save and invest, it didn't hurt me nearly as bad as if I waited until those years were already gone before I started saving and investing at all. Does that make sense? It can be a little bit confusing, but this chart is actually really good to display how much more you can save, or sorry, how much more you get when you invest. So I'm seeing here, somebody started saving in their mid-40s and had almost no savings. And their mother told them to put 10% away when they were in their 20s, but something always ate whatever savings they had. So now they're finally in their job where they can start saving, so they have to play catch up. Yes, that can be hard when you need to play catch up, because you just don't have, you then have to put in more money or save more because you don't have as much time for your investment to earn profits or to grow. Okay, so really it's a time thing. The longer time that you have It's a lesson for younger attendees to learn. Absolutely, absolutely. And that's why you always hear older people saying to younger people, start investing now. Start now. Start as early as you can. It doesn't matter how little it is. Start investing now. So that's the thing. When your investments earn some money, each year, each month, they're earning money on the money they've already earned. So it's compounding and it's just building up and building up. But if you don't have any money in there invested at all, there's nothing for it to build on. Okay. So what are your savings options or your savings vehicles?
Myra, can I just add one quick thing to that pay yourself first and the 10%? And it's tough, right? Especially when you're young. But what I always did is I had an automatic withdrawal the same day as my paycheck. And it started out with $25 a paycheck. And I, wasn't making a lot of money, but because the money was going before I paid my bills, then it was gone. I didn't have the option of it sitting somewhere that then it's like, oh, I really would like to spend, and sometimes it's, sometimes it is a need, absolutely. But, if it's out of your bank account, even if it's $10, like it can be a very small amount, but if it's just taken out of your bank account immediately, and mine automatically went to an RRSP, sorry. And I know that's not for everybody because it depends on your path. But for me, because I was working for a nonprofit, putting it into an RRSP was my best option. And it just like automatically went twice a month on this, 26 times a year, because every time I had a payday, it just automatically went away. And because it's not there, you can't spend it. And, the money built up, and when I wanted to buy my first home, I could do my home buyers, taking the money out for that. So I did use a little bit of it, but just if it's gone, you can't spend it. And it makes a big difference.
It's a one-time setup and then it's just done. You don't have to physically go in and try and transfer it or remember to transfer it. Once it's set up, it's done and it automatically happens. So that takes some stress off of you as well with trying to get it going. The other thing to keep in mind is when you're out there and you're starting your careers, compare employers. Your benefits can also include a group RSP or a pension plan. And for example, CUA has a really good pension plan. We are required to participate in it, and it's a minimum 6% of our income. But then CUA matches that and puts that same amount in for us. So really, it's like getting a 6% raise. Even though I'm not seeing that money now, I will see it when I'm in retirement. Okay, and it's money that isn't coming out of my income. It's not added to my income either. It's like getting, I want to say free money, really. And it's like getting a raise because ultimately you are getting that money when you need it in retirement. So keep those things in mind, especially these days. It's not going to be unusual if you're starting your career that there's a couple of opportunities that you'll have. So compare benefits as well. Okay. It's a great way to start your savings and your investment without having to do anything. And at least half of it is somebody else's money. So it's great. All right, if there's anything else that you take from this, take that, please. So our savings vehicles. Does anybody, I'm just going to go back to sharing my screen here. We have registered accounts and we have non-registered accounts. Can anybody tell me what a registered account is? Just a basic definition of a registered account. Or even who it's registered with. Sorry, Brenda, can you see that screen up there?
Yeah. Oh,
Okay.
I think, did you freeze?
I may have, no, I think, can you hear me okay?
Myra may have frozen up. Hopefully she can get back to us. There she is.
Am I there? I think my computer's frozen. Just give me 1 sec.
Okay, you're back. I can hear you again. And we can see the slide, but it's also, I think, the one where I can see like the notes on the side, but they're kind of weird.
Oh, okay, because what I'm seeing, I have the presentation and I can't seem to get back to. Let me end the presentation, or not the
Oh, yeah.
presentation. Let me end
You're-
the slides for me.
Okay.
And I'll see if I can get back to you guys.
All right.
Why is it not?
I think your computer says it's Friday and they want the weekend off.
They certainly do. Certainly do. I'm going to close some things down here. I can see you, Brenda, but just in a small little square.
Okay.
What am I doing wrong? I've lost.
Do you
Let
want
me
me to
see.
bring it up?
If you could, please.
Share screen. Here we go.
So unfortunately, I can't see the chat or anything now, Brenda. I just see you in a like a thumbnail kind of thing. But we will continue. We will continue. So any ideas? It's coming back. Here we go.
Is that mine?
Oh, maybe it is yours, but at least I can see the whole, yeah, that's yours. At least I can see the whole screen now.
Can you see the notes as well, or do you want me to change it?
I can see the notes as well, but that's okay. If you want to change it so that it's just the slides, that would be fine. There we go. Okay, so now I can see the chat. Okay, perfect. So who are registered accounts registered with?
So the chat, when it was blocked, was somebody said they didn't know.
Okay,
Your
all
bank.
right. Sorry, you said the bank?
Yeah.
The bank facilitates registered accounts, but they're actually registered with the Government of Canada. So the Government of Canada has these programs to help us as Canadian citizens with savings, retirements, education, retirement savings, education savings, and those sorts of things. Now, the reason that these are registered is because they're government programs, and they often, I shouldn't say often, they all offer some sort of bonus or benefit with them. It's not always a tax benefit, but sometimes it is. Okay, so for example, a tax-free savings account, the money that you put into your tax-free savings account is after tax money. So the money's already been taxed, but anything that you earn within that account is tax-free. So when you withdraw it, there's absolutely no consequences. Anything that's in that account and you withdraw, you don't need to report it for any taxation or that sort of thing with a tax-free savings account. In RRSP, for example, it is money that when you contribute, it helps you get the taxes that you paid on it back. However, when you take that money out, so later on, when you take the money out and it becomes your income in retirement, it is then taxed, but potentially at a lower tax rate because you're making less money when you're retired. Excuse me. An RESP, or Registered Education Savings Plan, is exactly for that, for education savings for children. Money that gets contributed to that by the parents, for example, excuse me, is after tax dollars, but then the government offers grants and bursaries that they will contribute to the education savings plan as well. When the money is withdrawn, the grant and bursary money that is withdrawn from that, that is taxed on the student. Generally, the student doesn't make enough money to pay taxes, so it doesn't affect anybody tax-wise. And then we have non-registered accounts. So you have the option to invest or have savings accounts that are not registered. So there is no government bonus or program that they fall under. And there is not going to be any taxation benefit, so to speak, that's offered with non-registered accounts. So you do need to be careful, and you do need to ask questions when you are saving and investing as to which of these vehicles you actually use, okay? Because non-registered accounts, even though there's no taxation benefit to a non-registered account, if you save enough in a non-registered account, or depending on the type of earnings that you get in a non-registered account, it can be taxed as income, and under other potential tax, it can have tax implications, which can cost you. So it's a good idea to educate yourself, to ask lots of questions when you're saving and investing, especially when you're investing. If you're saving under a non-registered savings account and you earn more than $50 of interest in that account, so it can be just a simple savings banking account, and you earn more than $50 in a year, the bank does have to produce a T4 for you, and that becomes part of your income for that year, and it will be taxed like income. Okay, so it's just things to be aware of, questions to ask. Okay. Best question you can ask when you start your savings plan, even if it is a savings account, say to the person that's opening it for you, how will this be taxed? Okay. Because you might get a surprise at the end of the year. Any questions on that? It's a very broad overview of what the savings vehicles are. One that's not here is the Registered Disability Savings Plan. Works a little bit different from a registered retirement savings plan, but it is designed to be used later in life in retirement as well. That program is only available to people who qualify for the disability tax credit. So if you qualify for that, you are able to set up a registered disability savings plans. And it's a good idea to do it if you do qualify, because there are grants that the government offers for that as well. Okay. So Brenda, if you want to go to the next slide, please. Okay, we talked a little bit about this. Emergency fund. There's all kinds of reasons to have an emergency fund. It's a great idea to have an emergency fund. But how much do you need in your emergency fund, and how do you get there? Any ideas? Anything that you guys have heard? Okay, emergency funds can be pretty daunting. They really can. Some people, feel that they need to have their retirement savings, then they need to have their emergency fund, then they need to have, whatever else, home maintenance fund. Some people break their emergency funds into a bunch of different things. Depending on each person's circumstances, situation, employment, it can look very different. Again, your finances are as individual as your fingerprint. So how much you need in an emergency fund, whether you need one or multiple emergency funds, that's something that you should be able to sit down and even talk to your banker about. If your banker doesn't understand what your goals are, or is pushing a product on you, or you're just not communicating well with that person, get up and go to the next office and see if you communicate any better with the next person. Because this is somebody who is going to help you attain your financial goals. And if they're not on the same page as you, if they're not understanding what your goals are, if they're not taking the time to educate you, then you need to go to somebody else. Okay. Excuse me. As with any profession, there's going to be people who are really good at their jobs and people who aren't necessarily as good and have a different focus for their career than, really helping and doing, like some people love digging into lending and other people love digging into investments and savings. So you're going to have those people, like nobody's doing a bad job, but it's just that their interest lies somewhere or their strength is somewhere else than what you need at that moment. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Same thing with a mechanic. You may have a mechanic you love and he's really great with engine repair, but he's not so strong in maybe doing body work. So you need to go somewhere else where it's somebody who only does body work. Same sort of idea. Okay. Keep in mind, your emergency fund can look really different. So for example, if you have a really strong retirement savings plan and all of a sudden you have a job loss, for whatever reason, maybe employment insurance isn't quite enough to cover your bills. Do you have insurance that covers job loss? Do you have creditor insurance, which is offered by the banks on your specific products that covers job loss and will at least pay your minimum payments for you? So an emergency fund may not be actual money in a savings account. It could be an insurance policy that you're paying for. Again, you have a strong RSP, but no actual savings outside of that. Job loss, employment insurance isn't necessarily covering all your bills. It may be okay to withdraw some from your retirement savings plan to cover the rest of that until you get your employment back on track. Again, talk to your banker, see what your options are, but don't get too hung up on having a very specific emergency fund. It can look different for everybody, but you should have something in place that you can fall back on. Okay. Brenda, do you want to go to the next slide, please? Okay, so investing. What we've already said is investing is really save your savings, but with the anticipation that you're going to earn money or watch that grow. So does anybody know about the different types of investments, or do any of you have investments right now?
Hello, I used to have some investments when I was in Mexico. I just received a little percentage of that investment on the bank. Now I have I have an account in RBC, the banking account and the savings account, and
Right.
that savings have every month I get something for that savings, like a little percentage. I don't know. I have no what. Yeah.
You're earning interest, so you're probably in a high interest savings account, and that is absolutely a type of investment. A savings account can be an investment as well, as long as it does pay you interest. So the interest is paid by the bank for you to keep your money there, basically, because in very simple terms, the way a bank works is you deposit your money, the bank then uses that money to lend out to people who need it. Not physically, but in very basic terms, the money that is on deposit is then used to lend out. We charge interest to the people who are borrowing the money, and we pay a little bit of that to the people who are providing the money, so that you'll keep the money there so that we can continue making money by the higher interest that we charge when we lend it out. Okay, yeah. I hope that makes sense. I also see Amy.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I believe, yeah, Amy, thank you for sharing what you're sharing, Amy. I know it can be pretty personal, but Absolutely. Amy shared that the tip of using your RSPs in the event of job loss can be really helpful, because if you don't have that emergency fund, that is a form of emergency fund in certain situations. You know, when it comes to investing, there are a few different options, and often people will not consider just regular bank accounts, savings bank accounts, as investments, but they can fit into your overall investment plan, because like Fabiola was just saying, they do provide some interest payments, okay? And they're secure. You don't have, there's no risk with it, for example. But because there's no risk with it, you do earn less than some of the other investment options. Brenda, can we go to the next slide? So we have guaranteed investment certificates, also called term deposits. Same thing. Why there's the two different names, I'm not. Term deposit is an old traditional name for guaranteed investment certificate. There's also mutual funds and stocks. And under stocks, you could also consider Bitcoin. So guaranteed investment certificates, again, offered by all of the banks and the credit unions. They're called guaranteed investment certificates because, one, they are an investment. Two, you usually get an actual certificate. And way back when, you did get an actual certificate. Now they're generally electronic certificates that you can get. They don't look like they're an actual certificate, but it is a certificate that you get. And the parts that are guaranteed are your principal. So the amount that you're putting into it is guaranteed. There's no risk, you won't lose it. The interest rate and the length of time that you're investing can be guaranteed. There are some options that you don't need to lock it in for any particular amount of time, but you're still guaranteed a certain interest rate on that. Mutual funds and stocks, there's no guarantees with them. There is risk involved. Okay, you can lose the money that you invest in either one of those. So does anybody know what mutual funds are compared to stocks? Okay, so we've got some people saying that they're not quite sure. So mutual funds, well, let's start with stocks. Stocks are when you hear that companies are publicly traded. So for example, the banks, Scotiabank, RBC, all the big five banks, they're publicly traded. So they have stocks that people can purchase to help fund whatever that company needs. You know, IBM, Apple, even Yellow Pages. There's a bunch of different companies, like millions of companies, that offer stock options. And you'll often hear about the different stock markets. So they can sell their stocks on different markets. There's the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, S&P 500. There's a bunch of different stock markets, just like going to the mall. And there's a bunch of different stores. There's or a bunch of different malls even. There's a bunch of different stock markets. Okay, when you're purchasing stocks, you are purchasing directly into ownership of that company. So, and you often have to have a lot of money. So for example, you know, one stock in RBC, don't quote me on this, I do not follow it. I'm not sure of exactly what their stock value is, but I've seen it be as high as $120 per stock. So if you have $1,000, you're not buying very much stock. And if all you have is $1,000, all you're investing in is a few stocks of RBC, okay, or whatever company you choose. The risk that you're incurring from that is that if your stocks go down, you're losing that money. Excuse me. If anything happens with RBC, you're losing that money, okay? With mutual funds, you are pooling your money together with other people who have the same sort of risk tolerance, want to invest in the same types of companies or in the same types of economies or markets. And you'll have a fund manager or a team who manages the mutual fund. They pool this money together, and the mutual fund will have an objective, whether the objective is growth through dividends or growth through capital gains, growth through, there's all kinds of things. The objective can be to earn dividends in the oil industry, or it can be to invest in emerging markets. It can be a variety of things. So you can pick and choose what type of, where you want your money to be invested. But because you don't have very much money, you can then pool it with all of these other people who have the same ideas about where they want to invest, and you have more buying power because of that. Okay, and it also helps because that money is spread out among various companies, a lot of different companies. Okay, so stocks, you're basically on your own, and you're managing your own money in the stocks, doing the research on the companies, trying to figure out what this company is going to be doing. You're going to want to be listening to their quarterly profit reports and deciding if you want to move that money. How do you sell it at that time? There's lots of self-directed investment options out there. All of the banks, even the credit unions, offer platforms for self-directed investments where you can buy stocks directly. But most people stay at the mutual fund level just because stocks take a lot of money and a lot of work. If you're not financially minded, mutual funds or guaranteed investment certificates are the way to go. So is the difference between stocks and mutual funds, does that make sense?
Sorry, I'm a little bit confused here. Actually, this is one of the main reasons why I wanted to join this session today, because I'm starting to want to understand more about investments, and I'm from a country that has really high interest rates for well, I keep forgetting what the word is that you use here, but it was when you, and I think you've mentioned it, but I forgot the name. I always forget the word for it. But it's when you set a money, when you put the money, some part of your money in the bank, and you set it apart for a period of time, and then after that period of time, it's returned to you with interest. So it's not the same as a savings account.
No, that would be the guaranteed investment certificate here, or term deposit.
Okay.
It would be very similar. Probably, like, each country is absolutely different in their banking, absolutely different. But if something in Canada, if you have money, your savings, and you lock it in, or agree that after a certain length of time, you'll get that money back with some interest paid, that's a guaranteed investment certificate or term deposit. And again, guaranteed investment certificate and term deposit, those are interchangeable terms.
Oh, okay. Thank you. And do you know what the interest rates usually are for those?
So they depend on a couple of things. Number one, the first thing that will determine the interest rate is the length of time that you're going to have it locked in. So generally we do 1 year to 5 years. You can do shorter in what they call a redeemable guaranteed investment certificate, but the interest rate is a lot lower. Okay, so generally right now for 1 year, you're looking at 4% or more, or at least that's what it is with credit unions, up to, I believe it's 4.85 is what I'm seeing for a 5 year. So not
for a 5 year.
For 5 years. So if you want to lock your money away,
regardless of the amount.
Pardon me?
Regardless of, would that be regardless of the amount?
It could, your amount could affect it. Okay, but in general, that's sort of the highest that I'm seeing for a 5-year term deposit.
Because in my country, I have a 9.5 interest rate
Oh, wow.
for whatever period of time I want. So if it's 3 months, I still have the 9.5.
Oh,
But
yeah,
if
no,
it's more than 6 months, for example, I know that it can get up to 11% of
yeah,
interest rate.
that's not happening in Canada. It's not.
Okay.
So what is your borrowing rate in your country? So if you were to borrow money, how much would you be paying?
Oh, I know it's pretty high. Pretty
Yeah.
high.
So interest rates
I don't
on,
know for sure because I haven't yet never used it. I only use
Yeah.
the guaranteed investment certificate. I'm
Yeah.
learning today.
so
But,
guaranteed investment certificates and term deposits, like I said, those two are interchangeable. The interest rates on those will always be lower than your basic lending rate, because like I just explained, the bank pays you that interest to use your money to lend it out to other people. So we have to make more than what we're paying you to lend your money out.
I think it would be, from what I've heard other people, it would range between the 20 to 30%
Exactly.
in the borrowing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So right now, borrowing for us is about, I want to say 9-10%. So that's why the guaranteed investment certificates and term deposits are in the 4 to 5% range. Okay, so that what you're going to earn, what you're going to earn on your guaranteed investment certificates is going to be in line with what the lending rates are. Like they're going to be less, but that's kind of where they move together. So as guaranteed investment certificates interest rates move up, so do lending rates. And as they move down, so do the lending rates. Okay. So I see some people have to leave because we're almost at the 11 o'clock mark. So yeah, and again, I know somebody asked, what's the minimum to invest in guaranteed investment certificates, even mutual funds? That's really dependent on your bank and the type of guaranteed investment certificate that you're looking at. Can be as low as $500. Generally, it's a minimum of $1,000. Mutual funds, you can start with as low as $25 for a lot of them. So depending on the type of investment that you want and your bank, that will determine your minimum investment. Okay. Any other questions, guys?
Sydney also said, I know some platforms you have to be able to pay. No, you have to pay to be able to buy stocks, like a membership or something. And I'm not really sure outside of doing this with your banks. And what about mutual funds? So what is the cost, I guess?
Those are all the fees so with stocks and even the self-directed platforms for stocks, you pay trading fees. So to be able to buy and sell stocks on the different markets, there are trading fees, and those come directly out of your pocket. Mutual funds, for mutual funds, there are fees involved. They're called management expense ratios. And when you get your earnings on mutual funds, those management expense ratios have already been removed. Those, depending on how volatile the mutual funds are. So, depending on what they're investing in, and if they're things that the market goes up and down a lot, it takes more management. Your management expense ratio is going to be a little bit higher. Okay. What you're paying for in those management expense ratios is your access to advice. So being able to talk to licensed mutual fund representatives who can help, sort all of the details out with you. The actual management of the mutual fund itself, the taxes that are on that, access to the information, so your mutual fund statements and that sort of thing. But those expenses need to be laid out for you and discussed with you before you sign for that investment. Okay, with mutual funds, it is a regulation. It needs to be discussed. If somebody is not discussing those expenses or the costs of the mutual fund, you need to get up and go somewhere else, because they are not adhering to not just banking regulations, but mutual fund licensing regulations. And it's a serious offense. Okay, a lot of work has been done in Canada for transparency around fees and things with mutual funds, and they need to divulge that information to you. Okay, I did see something else here in the chat. Are GICs taxable? And do you get the same tax perk at ours as RSPs? So this is the thing. When it comes to a registered account, and I wish I had a piece of paper to draw this out for you. So a registered account, regardless of the type of registered account, so whether it's an RSP, an RESP, or a tax-free savings account, that is like an umbrella, a cover. And you have these you have investment vehicles that you can have under the cover of a registered account. So you can have an RSP that holds cash, or a GIC, or a mutual fund, or a combination of all three, or any two. Okay. So a guaranteed investment certificate, if it's non-registered, yes, the earnings are taxable. A mutual fund that is not registered, yes, is taxable. Okay. If it's under the cover of a registered account, it depends on the registered account and what the rules are around the taxation of that. Okay, does that make sense? Does that answer that question? Okay, so that helps, great. I'm seeing a lot of questions come up about this. Let me see. So would I say that it could be more profitable to invest in mutual funds and stocks in the Canadian context? Nobody can answer that 100% for you, because we don't know. Nobody has that crystal ball. Okay. I will say I am a mutual fund fan. I believe in investing in mutual funds. But given that this is part of my role, it has always been part of my career, I have information at my fingertips, not because it's not information that anybody else can get, but I know where to get it. I know how to bring it up quickly. I know what to look at, rather than trying to sift through a bunch of information that's available. I know what to look at. I know what to keep my ear open for when it comes to the news and what they're saying about different economies. I know how changes in the Bank of Canada rate affects investors. I know all of this information. So for me, I would always choose mutual funds. Okay. I'm not interested in doing stocks. I don't want to delve into that much detail. And frankly, I just don't have the money to invest in as many stocks as I would want to. So I'm a mutual fund fan. And I take some risk with mutual funds that other people would not be comfortable with. So for me to say, oh yes, mutual funds, absolutely, that's not correct for me to do. I would need to sit down with you, talk to you about what you have for a savings plan, what your long-term goals are, and really mutual funds are long-term, okay? At a minimum 5 years, some people say it needs to be a minimum of 10 years. Okay, for somebody like me who has all the information and the knowledge and all that, I go even less than 5 years, but very, very particular reasons, and certain mutual funds I would use for anything less than 5 years. That discussion is very involved, and that needs to be a discussion based on you and your situation. Again, I go back to your finances are as individual as your fingerprint. So that discussion about whether mutual funds are profitable and would be for you, there's just so much more that I would need to talk to you about, which I'm happy to do. If you want to set up a time, I'm happy to do that. But I can't answer that. There is no yes or no answer to that, really. Okay.
No, and Myra, I mean, just on a personal level, I have both. I have like my RRSPs are all in mutual funds, and then my TFSA is in the stock market, which I use Qtrade to trade on. And, you know, when it's only about a year and a half since I started with the stocks and put the money into the TFSA. And, you know, they were doing so well. I was making so much money. And then I don't know if anybody's following the stock market, but in the last 6 to 8 months, it's really gone down. So
Yeah.
I now have less money in my TFSA than I put in there. So I've actually lost money at this point. Luckily, I don't have to take it out yet. And I'm hopeful that the market will come back up over the next year or two. So it really comes down to your risk tolerance. You know, are you willing to watch your money disappear, which it's more likely to do in the stocks than it is in a mutual fund, but it can go down in a mutual fund as well.
Right. And you know what, all of the self-directed investment platforms, Qtrade or I can't even remember what the ones are for the banks, but they all have their own self-directed investment platform. They often allow you to sign up and start a dummy account. So you play around with, you know, fake money, basically, and you get to experience what it would be like. You can actually, you know, see if you have the knowledge or how much more knowledge you're going to need to make stocks profitable, or even mutual funds, because the self-directed platforms also offer mutual funds. Now, if you're not interested in doing that much work or kind of having that kind of homework, then you can access mutual funds through the banks themselves. So you can sit down with somebody and have a full conversation and get that information all sorted out for you, and have the opportunity to ask all the questions you need to ask. The self-directed platforms, you do not get any advice. If you call in, you're getting technical assistance, and that's it. So when I say technical assistance, you know what, I don't know where to find this on your website, or your website isn't doing this for me. How do I fix that? You do not get advice on the stocks and the mutual funds themselves. You do not get that at all. Okay. So it's something to keep in mind. Now, just like Brenda's situation, you may start with the bank and doing the mutual funds, and then over time, as you learn more and you get more comfortable, you may want to switch to stocks. All of it is an evolution. All of it is. You know, some people start with GICs and term deposits, and then they're like, well, you know what, I think I want to try mutual funds. You know, fantastic. You know, you can't time the markets and whether stocks or mutual funds will go up or down. There's so many factors that are involved with it, so you can't time them. For example, you know, I say that, but people who have a lot of knowledge, for example, you know, Brenda's situation, I knew exactly what she was going to say when she said, you know, my stocks went up, and I was like, and they came right back down. I knew she was going to say that. You know, at the beginning of COVID, I had myself and my children's education money, and I invested big. Everything went into mutual funds at the beginning of COVID because the markets dropped drastically. And because there was an unknown, there was a huge unknown factor. So I basically bought mutual funds on sale, and then I just watched the money come up. And like I said, even my children's education money was in there, which most people, like even my banker, was like, you're crazy, don't do that with that money. But I had confidence in what I was doing. So, you know, it really, again, your risk tolerance, it's a full discussion with you and your banker. I'm seeing, oops. So I see that you've been in the chat, you've been considering starting investing for a year now. You don't really know where to access the information. Again, I did give you guys my email address, but I'll do it again. I can certainly help get you started. I really think if you're just starting, you should go to your banker. So make an appointment with somebody, tell them that you want to talk about investing, and they will put you in touch with somebody. All of the banks offer investment specialists, and all of the banks offer mutual funds. Okay, but as soon as you say you want self-directed, every bank and every banker will just back away from that. They'll say, are you sure you want to do this on your own? And they'll remind you that you won't get any advice. You're on your own, and they'll just back off from it. Okay. Any other questions, guys? I know we're a little bit over time here. But this was a really great discussion. I always find the savings and investment is always a great discussion. So thank you so much for participating. I'll put my email address here again for you. Please feel free if you have specific questions or something that's a little bit more on the personal side, absolutely feel free to reach out to me. And if there's nothing else, I guess I'll see everybody next Friday.
I'm just going to end the recording, but yes, thank you, Myra, once again. I love the conversations at the end, and I always learn a little bit every time as well, I think. And I've certainly gotten a little riskier with my investments over the years as I've gained the knowledge. I mean, years ago, it was all mutual funds. I would have never touched the stock market, but now I've played a little bit in there as well with a smaller amount of money. So I'm not willing to risk it all. So, but
and that's actually, sorry to cut you off there, Brenda. That's a really key thing when it comes to your risk tolerance. If you have a set amount of money that you want for, say, retirement, but then you have a little bit of money that you're not sure what you want to do with, and maybe you want to take that extra risk, each pool of money does not have to have the same risk tolerance. It has a different job. It can have a different risk tolerance. So, okay, guys, that's great. I will let everybody get back to their day, but thank you so much for the participation. I really love it when you guys have questions and I get to see what everybody is considering, and I learn something every time as well. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next Friday. Myra will be back.
Yes, I will.
I just wanted to really thank you for this session and these sessions that you're doing. Honestly, I unfortunately couldn't join the previous ones due to problems in my schedule, but I was really, really happy that I could join today because these are very important conversations, and I personally have never had the opportunity to have someone to give me advice or suggestions, or even to explain some terms and some forms of dealing with my money, honestly. And I have been trying to find information on my own, as I said, for a year now. I have an uncle that is always telling me to invest, but he doesn't really, he's like, start investing early, but he doesn't really explain properly, I would say, things to me. Yeah. So having an in-depth explanation about things and being able to ask questions, it's really, really special. I would say for most of us, I would say here that are at a young age in university. So, and for me, I'm from a different country, so it's also different here, and I have to adapt to a new context now. So this is very important, and I appreciate that you're doing this. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. And I mean, that's exactly why we do it, is because a lot of younger people have a hard time knowing where to go and where to get the information, which is exactly why Junior Achievement does these types of programs. And Natalie at Mount St. Vincent's, we do it with her every year, and whatever students want to join up, because a lot of adults don't know the information, and the only way is to be able to ask. But as Myra has said, the first couple of sessions as well, the best thing to do is to talk to your bank, and you don't have to, whatever they tell you the first time, you may want to talk to a second person so that they truly understand your values and what you want your money to do for you, because everybody that you talk to will have different advice, but finding somebody that you trust for that advice is key.
Thank you very much again.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right, goodbye.
Have
I'm
a
gonna,
good day.
I'm trying to figure out how to turn off the stop video. There we go. No, that's not it. All right, thank you. Bye-bye.